The Neuroscience of Leadership by David Rock and Jeffrey Schwartz. During the past 2 decades, scientists have gained perspectives on how change is initiated in the brain. By combining psychology and neuroscience, scientists have effectively shown how and what are some of the tendencies that occur in the brain to activate a positive and long-lasting change. Using brain imaging technologies, they've been able to notice tendencies in the brain and patterns in the way people think. People in positions of leadership can use these new findings to develop more accurate and far more effective ways to initiate change that don't rely on force, but instead depend on the natural tendency occurring already. They came up with 5 major findings, first of which being that change is pain. For most people, the process of going about a change is actually a very uncomfortable thing. And that's mostly due to the neurological connections in the brain. What we can understand about this is that in order to introduce new information, we have to be very careful. We can't overwhelm these circuits. The brain is able to develop almost a stamina by working and focusing greater attention on what it's doing, because the brain is automatically wired to alert itself when there's sort of an error message, or when disagreements between expectations and actuality emerge. This region of the brain is very close to the fear alert. These two responses, the error reporting that the hardwired brain sees with new information, triggers an uncomfortable fear response that also could be help explain why change is so challenging and uncomfortable. Second major finding: behaviorism doesn't work. The ideas that typical punishment and reward, or classic conditioning, if this then this model, really rarely works for anything other than rudimentary, simple concepts. So if we want to initiate change just by simply giving people rewards and punishing them when they don't go right, we're really building an expectation of failure. Third major finding: humanism is overrated. The psychological movement of the 1960s to build people up, make them feel good, give them positive feedback, and really try to befriend people, that only will get us so far. Anytime the patterns in the brain are challenged or disrupted, the brain reacts because it doesn't want to change. What this tells us, though, is gives us a glimmer of hope. If the brain is a pattern-making organ, which it is, then it's constantly seeking to create novel connections. It's constantly seeking to create new patterns. And so instead of the old model of behavior or leadership to kind of push someone or coax them, what the scientists are suggesting is that when people solve problems for themselves, the brain releases neurotransmitters that are really satisfying for the brain, and it's actually quite pleasurable and rewarding for people. What leaders can do, rather than lecturing and providing solutions, they can ask pertinent questions and support clients with their own process of working out the answer. This is really actually a novel concept and pretty important to understand. Our next major finding is that focus is power, sort of what I alluded to before. What we concentrate on will have an effect on the outcome. Through studies of the neurological connections, what we're finding is that the brain works very much as a quantum environment. What we know about quantum mechanics is, first of all, it's almost chaotic. Within this seemingly tireless system, there are patterns, however, and some of the patterns that have emerged are that consciousness, or what the observer brings to the table or brings to the experiment, actually has an effect on it. So focusing attention on what we hope to change will actually help to stabilize some of the brain circuits. So if we want to change, we sort of take the old behavior that we don't want, we got to just dismiss it, get it out of the way, and focus our attention on the desired outcomes. The more we can do this, the more the brain actually starts to take on these patterns, and there's a change in the neurological circuitry. The next great finding in this study was that expectations shape reality. 2005 study, mental experiments were done where people had the expectation of pain relief. The more people did this, the more the brain could automatically deliver pain relief. Leaders need to cultivate many possible moments of insight for people they're leading, with hopes that they'll come to their own conclusions. When someone takes an invested interest and ownership in their own process, this begins to pay off rewards. Along with this insight, when a person comes to a new insight, there's this rush of adrenaline, this rush of energy. This may be central to facilitating change. This is something very important. Human brains are so complex and so individual that there's almost little point in trying to work out how another person thinks. It's far more effective to help that person come to their own conclusions and their own insights. This will activate the brain as its own reward system, and a person will be naturally drawn towards the behavior change instead of resisting change when it's kind of initiated from outside. Ultimately, then, the biggest question, the biggest points, I guess, of this whole article is the question: how can leaders effectively change behavior? Using these findings, we can see how a leader can become much more sensitive to the process of change for the person they're trying to evoke, and how they can bring about natural change. Change is achieved through a solution-focused questioning. It's how we ask the questions. Do we approach it in a way that brings self-insight, or do we approach questions that are more of like a patriarchal or domineering, asymmetrical relationship, like through advice giving? In a world with so many distractions, and with new mental maps potentially being created every second in the brain, one of the biggest challenges is being able to focus enough attention on one idea. Leaders can make a big difference by gently reminding others about useful insights, and thus eliciting attention that otherwise might not have been paid. Helping people to focus. This could be a fundamental key for leaders. The goal for the leader should be to help people create a picture of new behaviors in their own mind, and in this process develop energizing new mental maps that have potential of becoming hardwired circuitry.